Joining us now to break down the market close, Dan Geltrude, who's the managing partner at Geltrude & Co. Dan, great to have you here on set.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. What's having the biggest impact on the close today?
Well, it certainly seems like the China currency manipulation being dropped related to phase one of the trade deal was an important factor. And I think the reason why it's important is because it's showing progress. Look, that's the United States giving up a lot. Donald Trump has made a lot of accusations about China related to manipulating their currency, which they have, okay? And for the United States to back down off of that position, I think it's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it's a positive sign for the market.
Right. I mean, in terms of all the other pieces of news that come through this, right, trade deal, I mean, we've seen every other day last year there was progress, there was no progress, there was progress, there was no progress, but this is an actual tangible piece of news that shows progress. And to your point, you know, I think every country manipulates their currency to be a little bit more advantageous for themselves, but for the markets too. I mean, I feel like this is already baked in. It hasn't baked in, right, for a long time. So what happens then on Wednesday when that trade deal gets signed? Does the market just already sort of ho-hum it?
This market has really been uncanny. It just wants to keep going up and up and up, no matter what's happening out there in the world. I have to say, if you look at last week and what was going on with Iran, right? And we were on the brink of what could have been a significant military conflict. And then what happens? The market has a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, and then it surges up once again. So to me, that really says that no matter what's going on in the world, this market believes in the strength of the economy and the news ahead, and it keeps surging. However, what we saw last year related to any news on China trade, the market was extraordinarily sensitive, right? A tweet was moving the market, and then news from China would move the market. So we'll have to see. I expect that once the deal is signed, the market will continue to rise. And then, of course, the discussion is going to be around what happens with phase two, which is going to be infinitely more complex in trying to come to terms, because I think there's going to be a lot more meat on the bone in the next go-round.
Right, and we've got to see what was actually in the deal for phase one as well, and perhaps the markets will move on some of the wording that's within that once we get those details. But then additionally, you've got a phase two that would be really very much starting to get talked about from the two sides as earnings are also coming out. So even if we hear inklings on movements, wording for phase two of the deal, you've still got earnings that are going to be the headline for the markets. Where are you thinking that that's going to net out?
So as far as just finishing off with China, I think that once phase one is signed, that's going to go to the background for a while, because phase two is going to be really a long-term thing. Going to be after the next election. Okay. Where do I see earnings going? I expect to see pretty strong earnings coming out across the board. I think the market is going to be happy. I know bank earnings, this is the week, and we're gonna see how the banks are doing, which I don't know if anybody's overly optimistic about where that's going to go. The banks have been under a lot of pressure on their net interest margin. Right. They've been squeezed with what's going on with the Fed and lowering the interest rates, putting a lot of pressure on bank earnings that way. At the same time, I think with the strength of the market, banks are going to have other income that is potentially going to offset that based upon, fees that they're going to be making on trades.
I want to go through two stocks really quickly because they are helping, at least one of these stocks, helping us get to some new highs, especially for the NASDAQ. Tesla, for example, this morning hit a fresh high after Oppenheimer raised its price target to $612, the highest on the street. I mean, how do you feel about a valuation for that price to be this high?
Well, it's really incredible, right, from where Tesla was not too long ago. And of course, we saw Elon Musk doing his dance moves with the opening of the plant in China. Yeah. So what I think is important there is you do have a mix in with what's going on with China. So the positive news in terms of making progress with China and where Tesla is going now with manufacturing there, I think it's pointed in the right direction. Look, I think that Tesla is the car of the future. It's had its issues. Elon Musk doesn't help things with some of the things that he says, but I really do think it's a solid company, and I think what Oppenheimer came out with is really a pretty big vote of confidence for where this company is going. You know, electric cars are the future, no question about it.
There's no doubting that. It's just a matter of how Tesla retains its high value customers that are out there and some of the mass market, especially as you've had the brands like Mercedes trying to get more into the mass market through their CLA models that are out there, and then still appeasing the luxury market as well. And then announcing, hey, we're going to get into EVs also. So you've got a company that has been so intertwined within an industry and had the consumer's mind saying, hey, we can just upgrade you into the next vehicle, and we'll take the old vehicle, we'll upgrade you, and then you'll still be in the Mercedes brand. So you have a consumer that essentially can look at their annexation to one brand and say, I'm just going to stick with that brand once they finally get an electric vehicle model. Do you think that's a risk for Tesla, or is that something that they can overcome, just as many bulls are now signaling the production and the ability to take new demand in new regions is also leaning in their favor?
I don't think there's any question about the fact that that's going to be a challenge for Tesla. I think all the major automakers are going to be moving to electric vehicles. Now the question is Tesla being out in front of everyone. And let's also remember too, when you're talking about electric vehicles, people automatically equate that with Tesla. Yeah. So they really do have a branding around that market, which I don't think that we should underestimate. And I think it's the other car companies that have to overcome that, as opposed to Tesla being concerned, well, if somebody's in a Mercedes, they're just going to stay with the brand. I'm not so sure that'll be the case, but it's certainly a threat to Tesla. I think the reason that the market is positive about Tesla is because the year that they've had this year, they're actually looking at potentially being able to hold on to cash flow,
right,
which has really been the challenge. And that's the difference.
Right, and on top of the production as well. So to your point, I'm sure investors like that. Now lastly, Lululemon also hitting now a 52-week high today. The company saying it is really had a really great holiday season. So what's really driving, do you think, the sentiment here? Analysts are expecting the company to report that e-commerce sales grew 30%.
Well, that's terrific news, right? In terms of seeing those holiday numbers being higher than expected. I don't think Lululemon is the only company that experienced that, particularly related to increasing e-commerce numbers. I think Lululemon is in a position of being in a highly competitive area. And I think what is going to have to be the difference maker going forward for them is basically the shopping experience that people are going to have, right? And that is going to be what makes the difference for them. And I think as they look at going into other markets, it's got to be about the experience related to that brand.
Right. It's a brand that's trying to drive culture or tap into culture that
right.
already exists, and it's certainly something that I think they've been looking to prioritize. It's worked well for them this far. I mean, a brand that since, the past 2 years has gone up by about 250%. So amazing returns.
And that's a good model for all the companies that are looking to compete with the Amazon model. Yeah. People who are buying things on Amazon are not getting that experience. I want this, they press a button, they get it. Lululemon is actually going in the opposite direction and saying, no. This is an experience. This isn't just buying a product.
Right.
We want to welcome you into the family.
Makes a lot of sense. Dan, thanks as always for being on with us.
Thank you.
Dan Geltrude is the managing partner over at Geltrude & Co.